Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Trade Policy Research Forum webinar for June 2023. We're going to be talking about targeted policies for developing country exports. So that obviously opens up a whole range of things. And I think a great thing about this webinar is that we're going to discuss some policies that economists have sometimes been suspicious about, things like special zones, things like targeted policies. And we're going to hear both about how that looks from an organization like the World Bank and the perspective that you get working there, and also how it looks on the ground as a practitioner. So something that we aim to do here at the Trade Policy Research Forum, and my name is Ben Shepherd. I'm co-founder of the forum with my partner in crime, Hannah Norberg, who's also on the call. One thing that we want to do is build bridges, as our logo suggests, between the different parts of the trade policy community. So between research and practice, between lawyers and political scientists and economists, and of course, between people working in high-income countries and people working in low and middle-income countries. So we're hoping we can have a really interesting discussion today. If you have questions or comments for our speakers, please feel free to put them in either the dedicated Q&A box in Zoom or in the chat box, and we'll take them up and ensure that they get into the Q&A at the end of the session. Let me stress, since we have people here who work for organizations, that everyone is speaking in a strictly personal capacity. So no one is here representing their organization. They've been generous enough to give us a little bit of their time, but they are speaking strictly for themselves. So with that, that's a brief introduction to the forum and what we're trying to do. Let me hand over to Hannah to introduce the session.
All right, thank you so very much for that, Ben. It is an amazing webinar that we are just on the cusp of opening up here. It's been months in the making, and it's one of these things that we're so fortunate to have, because the TPRF forum is all run on volunteers, and we happen to have amazing advisors that jump on. So last time it was Mia Michik, and today we have Michael Ferrantino here. And this is something that we have discussed for months. So I'm actually going to have him introduce the session because it's all his. So I'm not going to take any credit for it. But in the meantime, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in already. Please jump right into the chat box and write in where you're coming in from today. That's always fun. And have the questions going as we go along. We always run out of time. So don't hold on to these questions thinking that there's time. Put them in as you go. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Michael, who unfortunately has some issues with his camera today, but we will hear him loud and clear. Go ahead, Michael.
Thanks. Apologies for the technical issues, because I think I look really good today. But having set that aside, so we're going to talk about an area of economic policy that generally you don't learn much about in school, but if you are engaged in a practical manner, you end up learning a lot about this question of zones, and they come in like all these varieties. Like you will hear about special economic zones or export processing zones or industrial development zones. But the general idea of all of these is to create a set of policy conditions, infrastructure, ecosystem conditions, which may be easier to create in one part of a country than over the entire territory of a country. And what we've found is that some of these projects have been fantastically successful, and others have turned into like boondoggles of unfinished construction that really don't generate much in terms of exports or employment. And so we have two very qualified panelists here. Douglas Zeng is a senior economist from the World Bank, a former colleague of mine. We worked together on the World Development Report 2020 on global value chains, and he has both researched with and supported in an advisory role a large number of these zones. But then what we're especially privileged to have is an actual practitioner. Cholachit Vorawangso is Assistant Secretary General of the Eastern Economic Corridor in Thailand, which is quite a large and ambitious project that is trying to get it right and hopes to generate a lot of exports and investment and jobs. And so we will hear firstly from Douglas and then from Cholachit, and then open it up for general discussion where you all can ask anything you wanted to know about special zones but were afraid to ask. Okay, so Douglas, if you would.
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for the nice introduction. Hello, everybody. Also, thanks for Ben, Hannah, and all the Trade Policy Research Forum for this opportunity. I'm really delighted to actually discuss with all of you about this topic. So let me share my presentation first. Share screen. Can everybody see?
Yeah, perfectly, Douglas.
Okay, great. Let me just put on the full screen. Okay, so as Michael just said, that this SEZ, this industrial park, this is a kind of, you normally do not learn from the economic class. It's kind of, it could be part of the industrial organizations, and maybe some, of course, these days, more and more people pay attention to this because they are becoming increasingly important policy tools for developing countries. So my talk will cover the following issues. First, I want to briefly touch upon the concept rationale of this SEZs and industrial park, why we need that, right? So this is, as Michael also said, it's kind of a little bit controversial because of their success and the failures. That's why we also have a debate. So today we need to discuss into why they perform differently. Even in the same country, they perform differently, right? So the second about decision-making tree of this kind of spatial programs, I will have a diagram, not into details, but you can read my papers later on. The third, global trends of SEZ industrial parks. These are actually very important because they are reshaping how the zones are structured, operated. Then they also evolution of SEZ industrial parks. This is basically some of my newest research results published in some of journals. And then the quality performance framework of SEZ industrial parks. Then finally, the do's and don'ts. So I will begin with some brief introduction of what is SEZ, right? So SEZ often they refer to specifically designated geographic areas within a country's national boundaries, where the rules of business are generally more liberal. Here, what we say liberal means more business friendly, more investor friendly, okay, than those that prevail in the national territory. So why we call it spatial economic zones? Of course, many people hate this term, spatial. So because the people interpret it in different ways. Some people say it's spatial because of all these incentives, tax incentives. That's precisely where people are misunderstood. Why there's a spatial economic zone is called a spatial. I would say like they're spatial because of the following areas, right? First, the infrastructure, they have good access and good quality infrastructure. They're reliable and sustainable. That's the first reason why they're spatial. Secondly, they have customer regime that's spatial because it's more efficient customer regimes compared with the normal routines. They're faster, they're more efficient. Normally also they have duty and VAT free for for imports, right? So that's the second feature. Third, regulatory regime. They have a more like efficient licensing registration system, better planning, and more flexible regulatory regime. So that's why they helps to create actually more conducive business environment. Finally, value-added services. In this kind of areas, nobody will see the skills training centers more like, I would say demand-driven instead of supply-driven. And they have the other services like technology services and security. And these days also have other like social infrastructure, right? So that's why they're special. On a high level, actually categorize all the zones into two types. Because when you read this literature, sometimes you will get lost. There's so many different names, right? The special economic zones, industrial zones, free trade zones, bonded warehouse, right? Then the also economic development zones, high-tech parks, whatever. So many. But if you look into the nature of these zones, you can just classify it into two. Overall, I'll call all of them integrated industrial infrastructure because they're for economic development, for industrial development. Then one type is special economic zone, which has a special regime. As we mentioned, they have the special legal framework, also the special custom regime. And in some cases, of course, they have some incentives as well, right? The fiscal incentives. But the second types I would say the industrial parks. This kind of industrial parks, they do not have a special regimes. They rely on the existing investment laws and and also they don't have incentives normally. They have, of course, better infrastructures, better land accessibility, all this, right? That's the maybe only thing they're different from maybe rest of the economy. So these two types especially covers all types of zones to make it easy for you. So the why zones are needed. They're basically intended to overcome the government market failures, right? So these kind of failures could be, in different areas, but typically they have first is lack of serviced industrial land or infrastructure. That's typically investors are facing when they enter a developing country. They say this is water, power. This is the issue. Also, in some countries, really difficult to secure a piece of land with a reasonable price. The secondly, of course, the poor enabling environment and the sustainability. This about certain, regulations and the tax regimes maybe it's quite unbusiness friendly. So they need some reform. And finally, also government policy, government coordination failures, right? The different government agencies do not work together. It creates a very difficult environment, a very cumbersome process for registration, licensing, all these permits, all this. So because of these things, so that's why in many countries we need a zone, like we call it spatial policy approach. So why are they able to overcome this kind of market failure or government failures to deliver some kind of structural transformation, including like export, right? We are looking into investment attractions of this. So the reasons are the following. First, they can provide a bundling of efficient public services in a geographically concentrated area. Right? So as Michael also mentioned, that is the nationwide, in some countries, it's impossible to have a very efficient public services. And also it's even difficult to conduct any kind of reform, right? So that's why you have a concentrated area, right? Just so you have a spatial regime, spatial arrangement to hopefully that they will overcome this is existing bottlenecks and constraints. Second, serve as a platform for reforms. This is very important because you couldn't push through the lots of nationwide or sector-wide reforms. That's why you use this platform zones as like a way to pilot this kind of new policies, new approaches. Once you see the success, their impact, of course, you can roll it out, right? In the whole economy. Of course, when you see some of the problems you can deal with in a controlled environment, right? So Third is that improving efficiency of limited government funding for infrastructures. And normally in developed countries, government don't have enough money to improve the infrastructure nationwide. So that's why you try to create some more space for very efficient infrastructure, good quality, good reliability, right? Then fourthly, because these kind of zones could, if they are successful, of course, right? They can facilitate class development and promote industrial agglomeration. That's important for economic growth and competitiveness. Then also they can prepare open development. Many zones these days are part of the open planning, open development. They are well integrated with the open expansion, right? Finally, they can also promote sustainable green development. As we know, these days the sustainability and the green growth, green development has become the the key for any kind of industrialization process. So in this kind of concentrated area in the zones, you can have a more targeted approach to promote this kind of greener development, right? So how to, as a policymaker, how do you decide whether you want a zone or not? You do not need a zone, right? Here's some questions. Sorry, this is a kind of small font. This directly captured from my publication, the 2021, the do's and don'ts of a special economic zone. So this is a World Bank policy note. Actually, you can download and read it more carefully because there are some questions, right? What are the economic pillars and I mean the underpinning the drivers for the economic development for the country or the region? Then what are the market government failures, right? Depending on these failures, whether you have or not have, then you look into like what kind of approach, whether special economic zone or industrial park, right? And this is all based on whether there's a demand from the private sector, right? Then if you think it's necessary to have such a intervention, such a special policy approach, then there are different ways. Like in some countries maybe the government do it, but this is less popular now these days. Now the PPP approach, high level degree PPP and the lower level PPP, depending on the degree that the private sector is involved in the zone operation, right? Some cases purely private operated, developed, right? So you can, if you have interest, you can download my paper. Actually, have a more careful reading. Then some global new trends, right, of SEZs or industrial parks that can really reshaping the current and future SEZ landscape. One is going green, as we mentioned it. That's why we have increasing demand of eco-industrial parks. That's one of the instruments World Bank we actually other development agencies like UNIDO, UN are pushing in this space, and GIZ also. Then green digital, right? With the arrival of Industry 4.0. So there, digital technologies are increasingly being used by the zone management services. For example, like custom clearance. Obviously, it really improved the efficiency of the whole process. Then also, some of the digital-based digital zone began to emerge, such as Malaysia digital free trade zones. In China, they now have many e-commerce cities, e-commerce zone, right? Then the going borderless, that's the third trend. So as I mentioned that now there's a strong trend of integrating the open and industrial development. So the countries which already have a good business environment, they are actually developing zones with fenceless or borderless. You do not see any kind of border of these kind of zones, which is different from traditional type of zones. And they are even called the eco towns or smart cities, such as in Germany, Japan, Korea, and China. This actually emerging and developing more this type of zones. Finally, nearshoring or friendshoring. We know due to the global supply chain disruptions, also geopolitical tensions, investors increasingly seeking nearshoring or friendshoring to avoid more and more like these kind of risks. That's something also important for the invest promotion of the any zone programs. Then this slides actually shows the most recent research about how the economic zones have evolved over the time, right? Since 1959, when we have the first modern zone in Ireland. Now, since then, we already, evolved to fifth generation. This is basically my summary of all these zone program over the time. It's published in the it's called the past, present, and future of SEZs and their impact. It's in the Journal of International Economic Law, published in 2021. If you have interest, you also can read it. Basically, it's the first generation's EPZ. They are mostly focused on FDI exports, right? But there's a little linkages with the local economy. They're more and more, the less popular as many countries are facing out this type of. Second is multi-function SEZ. They are more wide-sized, multi-sector, multifunctional, and they have better linkages with the local economy. This is second generation, still popular, but they are more evolving to third generation. That's called EIP, Equal Industrial Park, and emphasizing both economic competitiveness and environment sustainability with more integrated approach. Then the fourth generation is more, I call it modern free trade zone. They focus on the high value added modern service sectors and more business friendly reforms. One of the examples is this Shanghai Free Trade Zone. It was like maybe actually more than 10 years ago it was launched. Then finally, the intelligent city, it's the futuristic, but it's already happening in some countries. And I call it fifth generation, or you can also call it digital zones or smart city, where the digital technology is embedded in production services and the industrial business activities fully integrated with urban, and they have an equal development concept. They are also equal in those parts. So the fifth generation is ideal. They combine all the good features of the previous zones, also try to avoid all the backdrops, right? So the SEZ industrial parks, right? They generally they're high risk, high return programs. That's why needs to be carefully designed and implemented. Global results are still quite mixed, and this shows that they're not easy to get it right. Even successful SEZ normally take 5 to 10 years to bear results. So when you evaluate this kind of program, you also need to give enough time horizon to see whether they're taking off or not. And also, it's always important to involve the private sector, private investment opportunities, and also develop as an eco industrial park, eco-friendly park. That's very important from the beginning, right? And here's an example of Shenzhen. Maybe all of you know that this is one of the most successful SEZs in the world. Also, this is where the China's modern economy started, right? It was actually incubated, I would say. All the reforms actually started from this zone. Like 40 years ago, it was a fishing village. It's nothing. Then after 30, 40 years ago, it's one of the mega city, also one of the most innovative cities in the world. So per capita GDP started like 89, less than $90, where this reform started. Then today is like more than 31,000. The population, it was used to be 0.3 million. Now it's more than 30 million. It's a mega city. So all the reforms like non-tenure price system, labor market, also SOE reform, financial system reform, tax reform, all these started from this special economic zones. After its success, it was of course replicated nationwide. So the overall China's SEZ included all kinds of national level parks, contributed to over 20% of national GDP, 46% of FDIs, and 60% of exports. I also created about over 11 million jobs, right? So if you have an interest, you can also read this earlier publication, Building Engines for Growth and Competitiveness in China, especially talking about SEZ and industrial clusters. It was a World Bank publication 2010. Here now I want to introduce the quality framework of the special economic zones, which actually determines the success.
Wrapping this up, sorry, so we can stay on schedule.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, basically there's 7 factors: legal and regulatory framework, government commitment, public service, zone level governance, industrial infrastructure, location and connectivity, human resource, and the market demand. This was also published on the global policy. Actually, this is part of the results Marco and myself did for the World Development Report in 2020. Right, this is
I use this framework to apply to 13 cases in sub-Saharan Africa, right? So they measured these kind of different 7 factors: good, average, poor. In the end, I linked these measurements of the 7 factors versus the performance. Basically jobs and the number of firms. You can see that the higher the score overall, right? This is the right is the number of firms they attracted. This is the jobs they created. There's a highly correlated. This is thanks to Michael. Actually, his team also created this chart. Actually. And so finally, the do's and don'ts. Basically, do's, you need to ensure the good logistics connectivity. Second, foster conducive business environment. It's really, have a reform-oriented mindset. Third, increase market compatibility, right? Finally, maximize positive spillovers through an inclusive, sustainable approach. Don't, you don't do something lack of planning and the supply driven. That's not good. And you need to don't do those ones which do not address the critical market and government failures, and also the poor policy legal environment. And this is also a problem, which leads to failure. Finally, environment and social risks also need to be dealt with carefully. Okay, thank you so much. Sorry, I have taken maybe more time than expected. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Doug. That was great. Thanks also for featuring that graph that I'd forgotten all about. Now, we'd like to hear from Cholachit, who will explain to us what it's like to implement one of these projects in the real world.
All right, okay, everybody. So let me share my screen a little bit. Just a moment. Can you see my screen? Uh-oh.
Yes, it's coming through now.
Right, okay. Can you see it properly?
And I think you have a first page says what's new. There you go.
Okay.
There we go. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so can you see
Yes,
now, right?
perfect.
All right. Okay. So it's good to be here, and I'm very delighted to talk to you about the practice in Thailand. So I joined the EEC since the very first day one, and I would like to confess that doing the special economic zone in reality is not that easy. So first of all, I'd like to say that Thailand, we have a trade partnership with many nations. So we have 14 FTAs with 18 partners. So all of them include about 65% of trade volume for Thailand. We joined the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnerships, like RCEP. Okay, so let me brief you a little bit about the Thailand's GDP growth. It just been back to the pre-COVID level mid of this year. And so the Thai economy will stand at the latest figures will stand at about 3.7%. And Thailand for the EEC, Eastern Economic Corridor, our special economic zones, it has a share about 15% of the national GDP. So in February, the forecast was about 3.3 for Thailand, and the EEC will stand at 4.5 GDP growth. And in case of if Thailand's GDP stands at 3.7, and so latest calculation will be like from the modeling, the EEC will grow at about 4.9. Right, but it's I would like to say that it's driven by the recovery in tourism and domestic demand. And then the latest figures of IMD, the Thailand has moved up the competitiveness ranking by 3 positions, placing at the 30th of the 64 economies worldwide, and we are the 3rd in ASEAN. Thailand has improved across various aspects including economics performance, government efficiency, business efficiency, and infrastructure. So here we are. This is Thailand and the EEC at a glance. So, well, turn back to 2017, the Royal Thai government initiated what we call Eastern Economic Corridor, or we call this EEC. It's located in the eastern side of Bangkok to be the area-based development initiative. I would like to say this is the first time in Thailand, aiming to revitalize the well-known eastern seaboard. So where for 30 years, numerous business developer has experience invest in this area. So the EEC project focus on the 3 provinces in Thailand, namely Rayong, Chonburi. Chonburi, if you think of Chonburi, I would like to say it's Pattaya, and Chachoengsao is the one is next to those 2 provinces. The EEC's development plans to envisage the significant transformation in Thailand, both a physical and social development, and uplift the country's competitiveness. So in the big picture of the EEC economic structure, the population is about 3.2 million people. A share of the GDP is about 15. And in terms of economic structure, 70% it's from industry sector, and 27% is a service sector. In tourism and related services, stand at about 17%. And agricultural sector is just only 3%. But what should I say, is like the value tropical fruit, probably you've probably known about rambutan, mango, mangosteen, a durian in particular, that is located in the EEC area as well. Okay. When we first doing the EEC, it's the first time in Thailand to do strategic area development. Usually we like Bangkok and separate province in the eastern, but this is now for the first time that we link these 3 provinces together, and we enact the EEC Act. There are 3 key development aspects that's put in the EEC Act, which is equip us with the various mechanisms. So I would like to split it into 3 pillars. The first one is a dedicated development mechanism to promote targeted industries, economic, to be able to do the promotional zone, to do the to provide the customized incentive, as Dr. Zeng just mentioned, and to do the ease of doing business entry. The second part, the second pillar, actually is focused on the favorable ecosystem. We would like to make sure that we provide enough fit to the demand of the industry need. So we call it EEC demand-driven education and training. And we set up a fund to support the local community to make sure that they get along with the this development. We just, and like as everybody just already said, it's like to do the inclusive development. And on the last pillar is to support the logistic connectivity, or uplift and enhance the connectivity in the region. And in this province, connect to Bangkok and also the rest of Thailand. We use the public-private partnership. We call it a fast track. Usually in Thailand, if you do the PPP, it will take you about 40 months. But in case of the EEC, it's reduced to 10 months. But we not reduce any procedures or any step, but we just doing in parallel time. It's like you can do feasibility study, AHIA, in parallel at the same time. It's like a dual track. It speed up all the process, and it's allow us to bring in the expertise, and then also the technologies, and of course the fund from the private to join us. So it takes time. So when after we started AEC in 2017, in 2018 to last year, about 5 years, we usually plan, we plan that the EEC in the first phase need to approve the amount of the investment, about 50 billion US dollars, comprised of 3 areas. One is the infrastructure project, and the second one is targeted industries, and lastly is about the integrated budget to support the fund and the local and the community development. And here to this year and 5 years from now, the site is about 65 billions. It's now ongoing, focusing in 5 clusters of business opportunity, and then also the futures of the, as Dr. Zeng just mentioned about the smart city. So here is the promotional zone in the EEC area. It's all across in the area and across all various sector. And in this EEC customized incentive package is we have some sort of the standard, but we revise it and customize case by case, depends on the whole project in order to make sure that it fits with the investors' demand and also what do we need. Maybe we experience that some companies, they come to they would like to make the investment, and if they attach along with a training center or a human resource, a training, stuff like that, it's so the incentive package can be customized depending on each project. And then we also provide a work permit and also the long-term visa and the long list and ownership. So this day in practice, I would like to say that it's not just only the tax or non-tax, but it's beyond that. It's about they see how they're going to live their life here, how they survive if they move the company, and how do they live their life, where his wife gonna work, and where is the children's gonna go to international schools, etc. And so another thing is about, in all, it's about the ease of doing business and about safety, environment, and everything's come into the comprehensive package. Okay, so here I would like to touch a little bit here about the human resource development. We join hands with many countries and many industry, and we provide the support of the training of the short course. We call it, the scheme is a co-endorse and co-pay. It's like we not allow the academic vocational school or university doing or drafting the curriculum all alone. So it's like they need to join hands with the industry or the company. So it's like the industry-led collaboration. So they co-design the curriculum together. The company contribute about 50% of the tuition fee, and then EEC support another 50%. And on that share of the 50% of the private sector, they can get a tax exemption about 250%. But what we need from them is the hiring guarantee for the one that they already trained. Okay, and this model is quite successful, and it helps and it helps us and also help the investor to make sure that they're gonna have the workforce that meet the industry demands. Okay, so I would like to turn a little bit into the key infrastructure project that I mentioned. So according to the Act, equivalent with the EEC Act, so we use this public-private partnership scheme to finance all key infrastructure projects in EEC, whether it starts from the rail, port, and air. If you can see from these slides here, Lam Chabang Deep Seaport is already there, and Magdaput Industrial Port Phase 3 is already there, and also the Utapao International Airport is already there as well. But what we invest is to uplift the standards and it increase the capacity. The project is totally new for us, is a high-speed rail to connect 3 airports, Suvarnabhumi, Dronmueang, and Utapao. So usually if you travel by car, it will take you about 2 hours from Bangkok to Utapao, which is located in near Pattaya. But the high-speed train will connect these 3 airports, and it helps us to reduce the time that we can reach from Bangkok to Pattaya less than 1 hour. Okay, and this is the current progress. So just only the Maput Industrial Port will start the operation in 2027, and the rest will be 2028 onwards. Okay, so I give you this, I already sent you the detail of my presentation. You can have a look and the detail of each project and the size. So I would like to say that this size of the investment, it's huge for Thailand. And it's the first time that we combine everything and we use the public-private partnership scheme. If you need to wait for the government and to support you all the connectivity and logistics, it will take more time. All right. So let me turn to the cluster of the 12 targeted industry. Or if you count on this, here is targeted industry that we do the plan and strategic plan and analyze that. It derived from fundamental what we have, and it's a match with the global demand, and also the technology driven that we would like to acquire. So we support 12 targeted industry, and we put it into 5 clusters, namely start from the medical health, digital, next generation automotive, biocircular and green economy, and also the services. For the past 5 years, we issue the investment promotion certificate to about, for the size, the total value, the size is about 38 billion US dollars. And if you look at which countries that come in first, the first place is in Japan. Second is China mainland, and Singapore, and the third, and the rest as shown in the slide. But I would like to tell you to have a look on the Thai partnership. The size is about 47%. So mostly of the investment in the EEZ is from the Thai major company as well, and in the terms of the joint venture. And if you're talking about this, which industry, the top 3 industry is petrochemical, electronics, and also the last one is a next generation automotive. Okay, and for the past 2 years after COVID, we see a surge coming in 3 particular sector. One is robotics. Second one is a health and medical device. And last one is about the biocircular and green, particularly the renewable energy, solar cell, and also the cogeneration and energy, and in many of this for the past 2 years. This is the current surge we see. Okay. And so I would like to touch a little bit on the BCG. Okay, here is some exclusive opportunity, and the BCG economy in Thailand, starting from food, health, medicine, materials, energy, and the waste management recycling. For the past 5 years, the size of the project, totally the value is about 4 billion US dollars. We have about 400 projects. There's 3 key activities is energy transition, recycling business, and the carbon management. Okay, and here is the EV. You probably have heard about that. We welcome lots of the Chinese and also many others in the EV business. So in the EEC, that EEC has a comprehensive ecosystem for EV production. Major EV car manufacturers, including China, Japan, Europe, has already invested in the EEC. And so EEC plan to be the largest battery production base in ASEAN. And we have the any others related parts and business standards to make sure that we have the ecosystem to support the EV production. So for the past 5 years, the size of the investment value of the EV is nearly about $3 billion US. And this size is approximately about 90% of the nationals receive the investment in the EV. And so let me give you some figures. EEC shares for the Thailand's GDP is 15%. EEC export about 25% to share with the nationals data. And for investment, the investment promotion that I explained to you earlier, this slides, the EEC alone, it has a share about 56% of the total of the investment promotion certificates issuance in Thailand. Okay. And so in health and well-being, we are the third biggest medical travel destination by value. And we're in number 5 rankings on the 2021 Global Health Security Index. In the EEC, we did 2 big projects on this, because the one is the EECG, is a genome sequencing center in EEC. It's already started last year. It's the first large-scale genome sequencing center in Thailand. And we plan to finish the first 50K genome within 2025. And we have
I'm
the
just going to jump in here. Sorry for a second to say that we need to wrap up. We're running out of time.
Right. Okay. So this is then, and then this is my last slide about the EEC and livable smart city. This is another upcoming project in the EEC. Okay, here we are. This is all. This is all for me. Thank you.
That is so interesting to see. I'm going to hand it right over to Michael, and remind everybody that this is so many interesting things to do, and to say, just put your questions in and we'll answer them as we go. We will be running out of time.
Then we can go back and forth between the questions we're getting in the chat and others. I would like to take moderator's privilege and ask one question of Cholachit. I noticed that the investments that you're getting in the zone are roughly half Thai and half international. And you mentioned a lot of big multinationals that are engaged. One of the things that economists wonder about is linkages and spillovers between international firms and local firms. Are there either direct linkages that you see where maybe a local firm is a supplier to an international firm, or vice versa, or whether there's spillovers, that there's learning opportunities that come from being physically coexisting in the zone?
Right, thank you for the question. So I would like to say that I see the spillover between the joint ventures partnership, and then I think most of the Thai companies that can be able to do the joint venture with the foreign company, it's like they uplift the standards and the way for the manufacturing and anything, and also into the human resource development as well. So I see that clearly in many, but I would like to say that the share is that I told you in the slides is it combine every sector, but actually it varies from sector to sector. And I see a lot of the spillover, I would like to say, in the next generation automotive, digital. That's the first two, if you mentioned about the spillover. I see, may I answer about one thing that I see in the chat box about the demand driven. Demand driven, I understand Dr. Zeng's approach about the demand driven, you say don't, but in case of the EEC, demand driven is industry demand to do the curriculum. So it's a demand, we EEC don't want the academic institutions to provide a list of the skill they would like to provide, because since they do the list, when they finish the list, it's already out. So it's good to move along with them and let the industry co-endorse the curriculum. That's the demand-driven approach that I mentioned.
Yeah, Doug, would you like to respond to that?
Just want to clarify. I think it's maybe the audience, one of the audience misread my slide. Actually, if I show this slide again, just sorry. Let me quickly just show it again. It's basically says you do not do those things. Can you see it? Sorry, maybe I.
It was obscured when it came up.
Maybe you can talk to.
Do you see it?
Yes.
Yeah, basically the don'ts, the first, lack of strategic planning and demand-driven approach. That means you do not do things which lack strategic planning, also lack demand-driven approach. So nothing inconsistent with the another presenter speaks. So everything has to be demand-driven in the zone program. Otherwise, will be recipe for failure, basically. Yeah.
So we agree. That's great. I just wanted to point out that the idea of the education being demand-driven has a very long history. There is a whole academic discipline you can major in, the chemical engineering, which arose as a result of a partnership between DuPont Corporation and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And so these are lessons that we can learn. So another question, which maybe both speakers could take a swing at, which is inspired by a feature of the Eastern Economic Corridor. You know that some of these like industrial parks can be built in the middle of nowhere in a fairly small area. We're talking in this case about the opposite kind of project, which extends over 3 provinces. There's already a substantial population. There's a pre-existing economic structure there. How is it different to do that kind of very large project?
Well, in case of the EEC, we already have some. So I like to say half it's already there and another half is new. So it's like the mixed combination. So the all have the ecosystem, but the new one is like they can design whatever they need. Let's say, for example, the cargo, the storage, and the warehouse in the new era is totally changed. Okay, so it's like we have the new area to fit with the current or the latest trend, and the old one can serve for the manufacturings, but there is change in the robotics, in in some approach, but there's still the old one can still serve the needs, let's say, because they have like electricity, water management, and the waste management, etc. So both, I would like to say, in the EEC is half-half, and it can be difficult for both of them. I mean, in the old one, they need to upgrade and do the, let's say, for example, the solar energy, if the investors are asking about the green energy, etc. We don't have it yet. I mean, the 100% green, but we have like a 50-50 right now.
Thanks. Doug, have you also worked with or studied any of these other large area projects?
Yes, we have some projects really, to cover some of the corridors. They call it growth poles, and also in some countries they have zones. So I think what's important is that really you need to have a very good strategic planning, and also the demand assessment from the beginning. I think like in Thailand's case, like Cholachit mentioned that they already have demand already, like half already full, right? So I think that's good. It gives you a good indication whether investors interested or not, right? And also you can test their views. If we expand it, another like maybe 50% of the zone, will you going to invest? And to what kind of the services or maybe infrastructure do you need it, right? So based on this kind of existing demand, you can actually project the future demand. Actually, that's a very good practice. So for those like starting from ground zero, those zones are more challenging because you don't have existing investors. So in those cases, the risk will be higher. So that means you have to really to do more due diligence. You have to do the pre-feasibility study at least to survey the firms, domestic or international investors, to see if it has a proper destination. If you build, are they going to come, right? Are you willing to come? If not, why not, right? What does it take for you to invest there, right? So this kind of questions need to be assessed, before really you start to develop the zone. So we did a similar, FDI survey for Turkey, right? When they want to upgrade the existing free zones up to the new generation, and it was very useful. Thanks.
Thanks. Hannah, I think we started a few minutes late. Do we have time for one more topic?
All right. Well, people will, sign off when they can, but let's do it. Yeah. Let's do one more. I think you accidentally muted yourself, Michael.
Sorry. Yeah, one of the measures of successes of these projects is whether they lead to agglomeration. And a picture of this might be you succeed in attracting one big lead firm, and then that lead firm brings in a bunch of the suppliers that they work with in other countries into your zone, and then maybe a second lead firm in the same industry who uses a lot of those like same suppliers will then show up. And so I wonder, first Doug and then Cholachit, like, how does one either encourage or discourage that sort of agglomeration? And Cholachit, what are you seeing in the Eastern Economic Corridor?
Okay, thank you, Michael. I think that's a really good question. That's regards to the anchor investors. The older zones basically they really love anchor investors, right? Because that's really show the interest of the big investors. And if you can get maybe one anchor investor for a small zone, that's already your set. You half successful, right? Almost successful. For example, one example is that. I worked with Ethiopia a lot. They built this Havasa industrial park, right? This park was purely demand driven because the investors was knocking the door, right? The PVH, the US, the bigger US firm, the government, right? The buyer, government firm, they say they want to have an investment in Africa. They talked with Kenya, also talked with Ethiopia. Say like, if you can build this kind of industrial park within 6 months, we will come, right? So they have their requirement, right? So the Ethiopia government they say this is definitely we want to get it. So they actually ask the Chinese, the SOE company also help. So the China, I think the China railway company, I think helped to build this park within, I think 8 months. It's one of the fastest also. So they actually, after that, they invested. So the PBH brought like all of its supply into this park. I think more than 20, it's close to 30 supplies. So this park was filled, very quickly, and they started export. That's one of the big success for Ethiopia, right? So that's one example. Like in China also, there's in Chongqing, it's a relatively landlocked area, but they got HP, right? Once HP invested, that they become the huge, the many supplies followed. So there are lots of laptops are actually manufactured in that city. Yeah, just some example. Thanks.
Okay, for the sample in the EEC that I mentioned about BYD, and also the Amazon web service in the digital, we need to have infrastructure that's fit with what the investor need. For example, Thailand is a major exporter for car business for quite some time. So it's like we have a base of the supply chain, etc. So it's one of the key elements that we attract the BYD. So they're not like start anything from scratch. They can build up on that. And so they for the Amazon web base, they will locate in the EECD Digital Park. In the EEC, we have the cable submarine there. So it's like they can make sure they can have like a consistent signal, and then the internet and everything is already there. So I think first of all, the anchor is business depends on the I think what is the investor need. So basically, I would like to support Dr. Shen about the connectivity and logistic, and also the supply chain is the key to attract the investor into the special economic zone.
This is a fascinating conversation, Ben. I wish we had many more hours.
I know you mentioned that we always run out of time, so this has been no exception to our rule. But that was a really great conversation. Let me tell you one thing that I loved about it. I come from an economics background, working on trade, and we've always been suspicious of SEZ's sectoral initiatives in general. But countries all around the world are doing it, and some are doing it very, very successfully. So I think this has been a real eye-opener for me to hear about what some of the criteria are that go into how you can do this successfully and what exactly you can get out of it. So I really appreciated the dialogue that we had between our two speakers. It was two very different but complementary perspectives. So thank you both to Doug and to Cholachit for joining us. Thank you to Michael for excellent moderation and for bringing the whole session together. We really appreciate that. And of course, thanks to everyone for joining us for this session and for the Q&A as well. Let me give a plug.
Ben,
yeah.
Ben, just before you go, so people who are, leaving here now with FOMO, you don't need to have FOMO because this is recorded. It will be coming up on the website. And we also have the presentations. I will be posting them online too, so you're not missing out. And also excellent speakers. Are you all right with, so we have a big LinkedIn group with a couple of thousand people in it. Is it all right if people reach out if they have questions? I'm sure that Douglas, you'll get questions on research that needs to be done, and Cholachit, you'll get questions from policymakers, like what are the things that we should know. And also if you have some great tips,
Sure.
if you have
great
takeaways on that,
no
we'd
problem.
be happy to have that posted too. Yes, is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Okay, thanks so much. Let me just mention as well, for those still with us and for those on the recording, we'll be back next month. So our July webinar is on July 27th, again, as always, at 9 a.m. Eastern time. We're going to have Hildegunn Nordas, who of course is a great expert on services trade from NOPI in Oslo. She's going to be talking about the services dimensions of an EU-India FTA. And we'll have comments from Amrita Saha at the Institute of Development Studies at the University of Sussex. So a much more classic trade policy issue, a trade agreement. But trade and services, of course, was something we talked about today and we frequently talk about on these sessions. So again, thank you very much to everyone for your participation, and we look forward to seeing as many of you as possible in a month's time. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Michael. If you want to post something about this to keep the conversation going, Michael, we'd be happy to have it on LinkedIn.